Good morning. Mary Avery has been singing since children's choir at First Baptist Church. She's sung in numerous church choirs, large and small, audition-only concert, a cappella choirs in Washington, D.C., Tokyo, Japan, during foreign service postings in Hong Kong, Ho Chi Minh, Mexico City, and Singapore. She enjoys being one of BBUUC's song leaders. This is her first time singing solo in front of the audience in 20 years. Enjoy.
This song was made famous by the great Nina Simone, singing about a world free from racism. I also find it meaningful to anyone who has something on their heart that keeps them from feeling free. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break these chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole round world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you could know how it feels to be me. Then you'd see and you'd know everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things that I can do. I'm way overdue, but I'm starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird up in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea, and I'd sing 'cause I'd know. Yes, I'd sing 'cause I'd know. I'd sing 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free.
That was glorious. Lovely. Our opening words come from Reverend Andrew Pakula. Come into this circle of community. Come into this sacred space. Come into this circle of community. Come into this sacred space. Be not tentative. Bring your whole self. Bring the joy that makes your heart sing. Bring your kindness and your compassion. Bring also your sorrow, your pain. Bring your brokenness and your disappointments. Spirit of love and mystery, help us to recognize the spark of the divine that resides within each of us. Good morning again. I'm your worship leader. My name is Claudia Marshall, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm your worship leader, and I am just so happy for you guys to be here today to celebrate Father's Day and Juneteenth with us. If you're new here and you want to learn more about us, and we hope you do, you can always learn about us there's a back table back there at the foyer, which helps you learn about us, Unitarian Universalism. Unitarian Universalism is a faith to me which influences us by helping us see the perspectives of other people through our principles. And we activate ourselves through the work of justice, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. Our membership chair, Julie Smithers. Where are you, Julie? She's back there in the back. Okay, she's back there in the back. Okay, she regularly has Learn About Me classes, And through these classes, you know, you get to kind of know what we're about and, you know, where we stand, that kind of thing. So if you want to learn more about us, see one of the people also, they have one of the yellow stickers that say, learn more about me. Okay, new, ask me, sorry. If you're ready to just jump in and help us out, we're always looking for volunteers. We have a lot of things that are going on. You know, just ask. Finally, we have, after the service, we have conversation and fair trade, coffee and snacks. For now, I'm just going to kindly remind everybody to silence their phones. And thank you for being here today for Father's Day and Juneteenth tomorrow. I now invite Jennifer Bachmeister to light our chalice while I read our chalice lighting. For sleepless nights and awaiting the curfew breakers, for anxious hours as a driving instructor, for hours spent on sidelines cheering and watching school plays, sometimes resting our eyes, for the pressures of breadwinning and wait till your father gets home, for teaching moments and mentoring moments, for making up answers when you just don't know, but are expected to because you know everything, for scrapes and boo-boo kisses and Band-Aids, for hugs and kisses and silliness and play, for bedtime stories and early morning ice time, for all the aftershave and ties received as gifts, for handing over car keys and waves goodbye, for father-daughter wedding dances and cradling grandchildren for the first time, for all the moments and for all the meaning in the role of a lifetime. We light our chalice for fathers and for fatherhood. We will now recite our congregational covenant, which can be found printed in your order of service. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. Please rise in body and or spirit as we sing our call to worship, and remain standing. Go ahead. No, it's okay. Go ahead. From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue. Please remain standing. We're going to sing our hymn on page 29. That's what.
Before you,
It's now time for all ages, a time for all ages. We have a wonderful video book called Juneteenth for Mazie.
Juneteenth for Mazie, written and illustrated by Floyd Cooper. For the Williams, the Banks, the Perkins, and the Cooper families, the clans that form my tree. Floyd. Mazie wants to play outside, but it is too late. It's getting dark, Mazie. It's time to stay inside. Mazie wants a cookie, but it is time for bed. Not now, little one. It's too close to bedtime. Mazie wants to stay up late, but she is too little. Bedtime is the rule, sweet girl. Why so grumpy, Sugar Bear? Asks Dad. I can't go where I want, have what I want, or do what I want, answers Mazie. Well, tomorrow you can have a celebration, says Dad. What are we celebrating? Asks Mazie. We will celebrate the day your great-great-great-grandpa Mose crossed into liberty. The day will be celebrated by us and many more families on the day we call Juneteenth. Dad lifts Mazie into his arms. I bet you're tired of hearing no all the time. Well, great-great-great-grandpa Mose heard no even more. Grandpa Mose worked in fields that stretched all the way to sunset. He and the other enslaved people would be bone tired, but they had to keep going. Their enslavers wouldn't let them quit, but as they worked, they thought about freedom. And before they finally went to sleep at night, they prayed about freedom and made plans for change and a better future. Some slaves ran north to freedom, following a bright star in the sky. They sweat, they bled, and they cried till those cries were quieted by a single proclamation from a brave president. Grandpa Mose heard that proclamation, read from the balcony of the hotel on that warm June day in Galveston, Texas. Grandpa Mose heard nothing but cheers, saw nothing but happiness, and felt nothing but pride shared by all those around him. The cheers became dancing, the dancing became celebrating. It went on and on into the night. Grandpa Mose and the others had found freedom. They continued to work, but this time they were paid for their hard work. So they worked, and they saved, and they never forgot the moment they heard, the moment that changed their lives forever. But things weren't perfect. Black people still struggled to stand shoulder to shoulder with white people. They still weren't treated as equals. It wasn't easy, but they never gave up. And every year on Juneteenth, they remembered. They marched for jobs, they lobbied for schools and the right to vote. They shouted for opportunity. And every year on Juneteenth, they celebrated and remembered. They learned and they grew. They forgave. They excelled and achieved. They became heroes. Now, sweet Mazie, it's your turn to celebrate, just like great-great-great-grandpa Mose. It's your turn, Mazie, to eat some barbecue and drink some strawberry pop. It's your turn to celebrate and to remember.
This song goes back well before Juneteenth, and it's been a song of hope and resistance, an anthem for all those who marched for all sorts of causes. Well, I'm on my way to heaven, we shall not be moved. I'm on my way to heaven, oh, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waterside. We shall not be moved. Help me out here. We shall not. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waterside. We shall not be moved. We're young and old together. Oh, we're young and old together. We shall not be moved. We're young and old together. Oh, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waterside. We shall not be moved. We love everybody. We love everybody. We shall not be moved. We love everybody. Oh, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waterside. We shall not be moved. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. We shall not be moved. We're all in this together. Oh, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waterside. We shall not be moved. We shall not. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waterside. We shall not be moved.
Our offertory words come from Victoria Weinstein. We say in our church that the offering is a sacrament of the free church. What we mean by that is that we believe it is a blessing to be able to govern and support our religious community ourselves, to make possible by generosity everything we dream of and do to live out our shared values. Every week we take up the spiritual value of generosity by taking an offering for the ministries of this church. Our plate then, as it is passed among us, becomes filled with the evidence of that generosity. It is our harvest gathered in every week for what most nourishes us. Our ushers, Tony Piccolotti and Rhonda Fraze, will now come, and you will receive the gifts of the congregation. The morning offering will be most gratefully received.
Good morning. I'm Linda Mowers, and I'm pleased to read the first of our two readings this morning, which is an excerpt from the book, Until I Am Free, Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America by Keisha N. Blain. By linking national concerns to global ones and calling for an expansive vision of rights and freedoms, Io Tometi, who is one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, was, as she pointed out, walking in the footsteps of many courageous civil rights and human rights defenders who came before her. Fannie Lou Hamer, who's pictured here behind me, was certainly one of these individuals. As an organizer during the 1960s and 70s, Hamer advocated an expansive vision of freedom, one that was fully inclusive of all marginalized groups in the United States and abroad. Hamer's visit to the African continent in 1964 had radically expanded her political vision, helping her see that the struggle for Black rights and freedom in the United States was, in the words of W.E.B. Du Bois, but a local phase of a world problem. As she traveled from place to place during the late 1960s and 70s, Hamer often reminded activists to never fall into the trap of imagining that their local struggle was somehow disconnected from the struggles of other marginalized peoples. Embracing a defining feature of the Black intellectual tradition, Hamer resisted what she saw as any individual or collective effort to advance social progress for some rather than for all. She said, now we've got to have some changes in this country, and not only changes for the Black man and not only changes for the Black woman, but the changes we have to have in this country are going to be for the liberation of all people. Hamer argued in a 1971 speech before the National Women's Political Caucus. She said, I am not just fighting for myself and for the Black race, but I am fighting for the Indians, I'm fighting for the Mexicans, I'm fighting for the Chinese, I'm fighting for anybody because as long as they are human beings, they need freedom. Hamer summarized her position in 5 powerful words that she often repeated. Nobody's free until everybody's free. Those words are as timely and significant today as they were when she first expressed them.
The second reading is a poem by Lucille Clifton entitled, Won't You Celebrate With Me? Won't you celebrate with me? What have I shaped into? A kind of life I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here on this bridge between starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight, my other hand come celebrate that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Our speaker today will be delivered by Reverend Dr. Matthew Johnson, who is the senior minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockford, Illinois. He has served there since 2008 after a 5-year ministry in Colorado Springs, Colorado. You can find more about him in the order service. Dr. Johnson was in our virtual pulpit last July 3rd when he recorded a sermon for us, The American Journey. Today's sermon was recorded last June 19th at his church in Rockford. So you will hear some references that were applicable at the time. We are glad to share with you his sermon entitled Juneteenth and the Meaning of Freedom.
If you don't recognize this image, this is the official Juneteenth flag, which was created some years ago. That's where this image comes from. The first time I heard about the holiday of Juneteenth, I heard the version that you probably heard, The version that's in a lot of the children's books about it and a lot of the quick descriptions about it, and you've probably heard this version, which is this. On June 19th, 1865, 2 months after the Confederacy surrendered, the Union Army arrived in Galveston, Texas. And the general told all the enslaved people there that they were free, that slavery was over. And the people, amazed, gathered to celebrate and rejoice. That's the usual story, right? You probably heard that story. It's not true. I mean, not exactly. It's close, but not quite. Here's what really happened, and we have to back up. In 1830, the government of Mexico abolished slavery and put a limit on immigration into its state of Texas, which prompted the Anglo settlers to revolt. And in 1836, the Republic of Texas declared independence as a slavery republic, which used enslaved people to harvest cotton for sale to the United States. The Mexican government invaded to take back their territory and routed the Texans at the Battle of the Alamo. You've heard of that one, right? But then the Texans regrouped and beat the Mexicans. Mexico refused to recognize the independence of Texas until in 1845, Texas was annexed into the United States, which sparked the Mexican-American War, which the Americans won and took massive amounts of land, Texas for good, and all of what is today New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, and parts of today's Colorado and Utah. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860, everyone expected, though Lincoln denied it, that he would push for the end of slavery, at least for the end of its expansion into some of that territory that had just been conquered from Mexico. So the South, including the now state of Texas, revolted. On September 22nd, 1862, a year and a half or so after the Civil War had begun, Lincoln said that on January 1st, 1863, he would end slavery in all states currently in revolt, but not those northern states where slavery still existed, by the by. That took until the 13th Amendment. So on New Year's Eve, 1862, enslaved people gathered to wait for midnight. They knew. Their networks of communication were excellent. They knew what was happening that night, and they stayed up and waited. And this tradition, the watch night, exists to this day, where black folks will gather in churches and homes and wait for the new year to begin. But emancipation was a piece of paper. Its enforcement, or the reality of it, only came when the Union Army arrived to enforce it. Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox on April 9th, 1865, but there were other Confederate armies in the field who slowly began to surrender after that when they realized they too would be defeated. But that process didn't actually end until June 23rd, 1865, when the Confederate Army in Oklahoma surrendered, which is after, remember, Lincoln had been assassinated at Ford's Theater. But even the surrender of the Army did not end slavery. The plantation owners still possessed the tools of control and death. And so the enslaved people knew that slavery was legally abolished, but they were not yet free. And they would not believe it and trust it and act on it until the Union soldier arrived to make it real. And in Galveston, Texas, that happened on the 19th of June of 1865. When the general did and read a proclamation, and then the troops went out to the plantations and made it real. The real story, the true story, makes two really important clarifications to the myth. First, it restores agency and awareness to the enslaved people. They were not dumb. They were not helpless. They were not ignorant of the world around them. They knew And they knew that the Union Army was coming and the Confederates were losing. But they also knew that it had to wait until it arrived. They had to wait until that arrived at their door, to their town. The story that the enslaved people didn't know that slavery was wrong, or that they didn't escape or fight back or rebel or undermine the system is a persistent myth to this day we must fight against. They constantly resisted through work slowdowns, escapes, insurrections, intentional mistakes, and more. And they knew that slavery was ending, but that the Union Army had to arrive to make it stick. And that's the second important thing, and where I want to really focus today. Freedom only exists when it is enforced and protected, and when it's made real not just in law, but in fact. Freedom requires commitment, struggle through the desert. In Bishop Tutu's words, it requires work, and it is easily undermined and attacked, and once given, can be taken away. 11 years later, in 1876, the North gave up on Reconstruction, and the Army and federal forces withdrew. And though the 13th Amendment said that slavery was over, in all but name, through much of the South it returned. Though the law said every man had the right to vote, poll taxes, complicated tests, and outright fraud made that a lie. And when black folks migrated north, they found that the freedom there promised was not total. Redlining, school segregation, job discrimination, and so forth meant that the freedom did not truly and fully exist. And we can name other examples, right? Roe v. Wade is still, at least for another week or so, the law of the land. But in many states, you can't access the right to abortion health care. Regulations, harassment, and violence has made it inaccessible. I noted this week that a Jewish synagogue in Florida sued that state for infringing on its religious freedom rights, since Jewish law requires, not permits, but requires an abortion when the health of the woman is seriously at risk. So is freedom only for some? Is religious freedom only for some religions? It's a question we're asking. Or another one, some say that it's their freedom to carry a firearm, but what about my freedom to not carry one? To walk around the world without feeling like I have to protect myself in a heavily armed society. Isn't that also a kind of freedom that's important? Freedom from random violence is an essential freedom, and it's one that some of us don't feel like we have as much as we should. We say we have the freedom to vote in this country, but doesn't the Electoral College and excessive gerrymandering make that right pretty worthless for a lot of people in a lot of elections? Or more generally, if you are denied equal treatment in a public accommodation, as is required by the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act on account of your race or gender or other qualifying characteristic, but the only way to enforce that right is to hire an expensive lawyer or to file a complaint with an agency that does nothing, then does the right even exist? If the Americans with Disabilities Act requires an accommodation but the employer just refuses, then are you really free? If you can't drive or don't drive and there are no safe sidewalks or crosswalks in your neighborhood, are you really free to move about the world? You get the point, right? Juneteenth celebrates not the day that a paper was signed, but the day that paper became real in their actual lives. And this celebration should remind us all, Americans who claim that freedom is a core value of our country, and Unitarian Universalists who likewise claim freedom as one of our core values, that we have to work to make freedom real. That means attending to those things that constrain people's lives in ways that restrict their flourishing. And we have to think about the complicated cases, right, where two people's understanding of freedom conflicts. One person's freedom of speech, another person's freedom from harassment. for example. And these are not always easy cases. Freedom requires struggle and discernment, and work together. But nobody's really free unless everybody's free, as Fannie Lou Hamer so famously said. This difference between individual freedom and freedom of a community is illustrated well in an example from the philosopher and theorist G.A. Cohen. I love this example. I read this week. 10 people are locked in a room. There is one key, but to use the key and leave, you have to take the key with you. So if one person uses the key, then all the other 9 people will remain trapped in the room forever. So theoretically, each of the 10 is free to leave, right? But the group as a whole is not free, because only one of them can actually leave. We rise or fall together. We get free together, or none of us are really free. I think that example illustrates something about the world we're living in. And by contrast, the world we want to live in, where the key lets everybody out to live their lives. Moving our model of freedom to the collective one, where we care about each other's freedom, is countercultural to the highly individualistic vision of the consumerist society, where if you're free to choose between Coke and Pepsi, then you're free. It does make me think about my favorite joke about libertarians. Do you know, and no offense to any libertarians here, but do you know what libertarians and house cats have in common? Both believe they are completely independent of other people, but actually depend on someone else to give them food and water. In fairness, I think the libertarian point that we should be free to do as we choose, so long as it doesn't impact the freedom of others, is a good point. I just think that freedom of others is a lot larger than we sometimes think. Or as something that includes freedom from, right? Freedom from, but also freedom to thrive and grow and participate fully in society, live in peace and well-being. Or as Roosevelt put it, the freedom to speak, yes. The freedom to worship as you see fit, yes. But also the freedom from want, since want, poverty, is a limitation on thriving. And fourth, the freedom from fear, that in a world of terror and violence and pandemic, living in fear of what others will do or say is not freedom. And this is, I think, one of the big takeaways from the true story of Juneteenth, at least for me, a white guy trained in the individualistic culture of neoliberal middle classness, that our freedom, our struggle, and our joy is bound together. A single garment of destiny and all that. We need each other to be truly free. And we don't just need each other to not interfere, right, with our lives. We actually need each other's support and love and care and encouragement. To be truly free, we need a community to catch us when we fall, so we can take chances. To be truly free, we need to see others live their dreams, so we might be inspired and they might thrive. To be truly free, we need to limit our narcissistic desires, our various privileges, our assumptions, and our habits, which limit the fullness of all of us together. The good news is that this collective struggle for collective freedom is tied to a collective joy. Juneteenth isn't a solo celebration. Right? You don't celebrate by yourself. It's not even a family celebration like a Shabbat meal or Thanksgiving. It's a community celebration. You choose a big park, and you bring food and music and play, and you gather together, and you celebrate as a community. There are ceremonies and speeches, and the whole community comes together, and that's what's happening this weekend at Mississippi Park here in Rockford. Because it's the community, not the individual, that is free or unfree. And for many decades, of course, black folks weren't allowed to have these parties at public parks. So they pooled their money together, they bought some vacant land, and they made their own park. And could you get a more clear example? Right? We make freedom together. Many of us have been taught to think the government will keep us free. But marginalized folks know that's just not true. We keep each other free. We make each other free. We by our care for each other, by building robust communities, building communities with less want and less fear. We make each other free. So I invite you on this day, on this holiday, which is multi-generational to some and new to others, as this holiday becomes part of our common life together, to resist the myth of disempowered people who learn of a gift from powerful generals, but to embrace the true story of people who knew they were free, of the need for effort to make freedom real, the need to protect it, to fight for it, to grow it, and to remember that we keep each other free. We make each other free through our care and our love and our support for all of us. Not one, not some, all. Nobody's free until everybody's free. And we come to celebrate this truth and the strength and the resilience and the beauty of a free people working for more free people. Let us imagine and build and make our way to that land where freedom, not for one, not for some, but for all, is the way of things. May it be so this day and every day. Amen.
Come take my hand, do the dance that only you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate. Come take my hand, do the dance that only you can. Like you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate. Although the world gets weird sometimes, although we're filled with fear sometimes, we make the pain disappear sometimes when we celebrate. Come take my hand, do the dance that only you can. Like you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate. Although the world gets weird sometimes, although we're filled with fear sometimes, we make the pain disappear sometimes when we celebrate. So come take my hand, do the dance you can. Like you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate.
Jennifer, if you'll come back, please. Our closing words are by John Lou Johnston. We shall overcome. When we can truly celebrate the diversity of contributions and talents offered by all people, we shall overcome hatred and prejudice and oppression. When we can truly extend our hands to one another in loving acceptance, we shall overcome the past that haunts us now. Living in peace and freedom, we shall overcome the wrongs that have happened and the debts left unpaid. Let us join together in that commitment to overcome. Let us say together, Amen, Namaste, Ashe.